HR a lot of times is the first contact with an employee. That being said, you got to sit down and put your best foot forward, and that best foot should be a key point in human resources as you go through. I've used a lot of times the thing called TQM, total quality management, where we go through actually measure the quality work that we're delivering out there. Sometimes it's not always been pretty. Sometimes HR gets thrown underneath the bus because the supervisor sits down there and they're slow. We have a hiring committee, and I've really been busy, so I'll get back to you when I have time to sit down and give you the names of the people. Well, how many do you plan on having? Oh, 3, but I got to figure out who they are. Well, how long will that take? Well, I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. And all of a sudden, it's 7 weeks out to bring an employee on board. It's HR, they're so slow. Where the supervisor we found is sitting on their hands all the time in the process. Document it, let them know, saying, okay, this was longer because of this over here. Don't sit down there and mince words because somebody is sitting there holding you up and then tossing you and your department underneath the bus as you go through. TQM can really help you identify issues like that. There's another one very comparable to it called CQI, Continuous Quality Improvement. I've used both of them for the purpose of our class. We're talking about TQM as you go through. So methods and processes, you want to sit down and make certain your process deals with internal and external customer needs as you go through. Every employee receives training and quality as you go through. Promote cooperation with vendors, managers, measure progress based on data as you go through. One time this sounds really ridiculous. We're trying to sit down and get the administrative bureaucracy out of place. We sat down there, we put a work order in, and we sent it through the normal company mail in the process as you go through. We sat down there, it took 31 days to get processed as you went through. We eliminated a couple of issues on it. Number one, the college president's name, he had a sign on it. What does that have to do with the work order in the process? We took that off. We took the vice president. We just had the supervisor there. If we had a problem with the supervisor, that's it. The supervisor better do their job report. And all of a sudden, we went from 31 days down to 5 as you go through. We paid attention to the aspect of financial disbursements. Okay, supervisor, chief financial officer, boom. We changed the process from a 44-day period down to a 21-day period. And even then, most of that was taken up by the chief financial officer taking their time researching things as you went through. We cut the time, though, in just about half on every single thing. We went through a whole series of things because he measured things on data and found out where the bottlenecks are. TQM is fabulous for finding this. The last one is quality is designed into the product or services as you go through. There's a thing out there called the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. It is a big deal. They use a thing called the ISO 9000 standards. There's 9001 for normal things. There's also even a standard for environmental issues in 14001 as you go through. But the ISO, International Organization of Standardization, the ISO standards, sometimes for you to earn an award as a company that's earned ISO 9000 quality, sometimes it takes almost 3 years of going through and formally documenting every single process in writing that you go through to develop a product or service. It takes a while, and sometimes you will see people put it on the side of their vehicles or on a building site, ISO 9001 certified as you go through, or whatever certification number they have. It's a big deal. Once you have that, you can put your stuff in to qualify for the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. And that's a big deal because you win something in a certain category, which means your quality standard is super high as well. And you advertise that a lot of times. There's a couple of processes you need to look at. Six Sigma, when they go through and they talk about the aspect of measuring, analyzing, improving, and controlling processes. That is a really good quality issue when it comes to working within the organization as you go through there. There are people out there that are, I got a black belt in Six Sigma. Pay attention. That actually does mean something. It means they're really gone through and they know how to measure things and really look at product and services based on data as well. If you give them some freedom, sometimes they go overboard. Better to have too much quality than not enough as you go through. Lean thinking, look about the less space, less effort. Look at lean technologies as well. Try to sit down and make things simple as you go through. Somebody once said, the best vehicle for simplicity, for profundity is simplicity. Well, profundity means the aspect of a lot of different stuff. You can explain a lot of technical jargon, a lot of relationship aspects of it by keeping it simple as you go through. Strip down all the excess verbiage and baggage out there and think about the lean thinking as you go through. Pay attention to the demographics of your workforce inside the organization, as well as the external labor force, because you'll be tapping them in one of two ways, either maybe hiring them as future employees or using them where they're at as a third-party vendor. Look on the average age, it's going to increase. Look on the diversity, that's going to increase. We talked about that already. Then also how immigration is going to affect the size and diversity in the American workforce, but also across entire planet Earth. Because if you are a global organization, which is pretty easy to do today compared to 20 years ago, that's something to pay attention to. You have a lot of labor force participation of those 55 and older. That's going to grow even more than it already has. HR has to look at career plateauing, retirement planning, retraining older workers, especially on technology issue. And we're going to look at it 4, sometimes 5 generations as you go through. Here you see a couple pie charts on comparisons between 2016 to 2026. You're going to see, if you look over here, the 55 and older crowd is getting larger, expected by 2026, and they're going to probably actually be larger yet in years to come, because people have a longer longevity and people want to stay engaged over here. Here's a chart of the different generations as you go through. We're going to look really, if you look on the traditionalists, for the most part, they've already retired and they're not in the organization. Although you have Warren Buffett out there and Charlie Munger and a whole series of older people from that generation out there as you go through. You have the boomers that really were born between 1946 to 64. They're still out in the workforce we have today as you go through. We have Gen X out here. They're really the ones that are starting to step up into the upper level, the chief positions in the organizations. And the millennials, they're really out there. They're really looking at the aspect that they want to go through and now become much higher levels in the organizations. A lot of them are resigning for the Great Resignation. And now you have the Gen Z coming out in the process. Those are born from 1996 to 2010 as you go through. You're going to see a lot of the different generations, and the 5 are out there, but really 4, we're going to see 4 generations actively in the workforce on a regular basis from now till the end of your careers as well in the process, and then maybe 5 generations by the year 2050 as you go through. A lot of mixed gender, race, nationality. There's a lot of diversity happening as you go through. Immigration helps, and sometimes you have to deal with the legal, illegal immigration status. That is part of the job of human resources, making certain employees are legally authorized to work in the United States, if that's where you're based, or whatever country that you're in. And you have to know how to manage a diverse workforce and have good, solid training and keep that up nonstop. We'll talk a lot more about training. It's a giant part of making certain you have a good, diverse workforce, and things are changing as you go through. Here's a good demographic. By the year 2026, you see the white is there as you go through, the African American, although African, there's a lot of people in that category that are Black that are not African heritage as you go through, Asian as you go through, and other groups in the process. So pay attention to the diversity of the workforce and use the technique of TQM, total quality management, to sit down there and make certain that your processes in HR are actually doing the job you claim they're supposed to be doing. And pay attention to things like the Malcolm Baldrige Awards and ISO, because if you're going to go through the ISO process, HR is going to be involved in that for sure. With that, take care.